Okay, welcome to Uncensored Conservatism, episode 107. We continue with the Trump-Russia collusion hoax, or Spygate as I call it. The DNC hack we're going to look at today. The 2016 presidential election was unlike any other in modern history before 2024, and for different reasons for the two major political parties. For the Democrats, it came down to two likely candidates, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. In the GOP, they established a record for nominees initially, with 18 going into the primaries. A series of debates, however, winnowed the field before a single vote was cast. As they entered the primary season, Donald Trump emerged as the frontrunner in polls. Now, Trump's candidacy was dismissed by most people as a publicity stunt, thanks to a series of rallies and his bizarre entrance into the campaign, or what they described as a bizarre entrance. By the end of March 2016, Trump emerged as the frontrunner in the primaries. Although Ted Cruz won the Iowa caucuses, Trump came roaring back by winning the next three contests in New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina, then winning 7 of 11 states on Super Tuesday. Ted Cruz and former Ohio Governor John Kasich soldiered on despite lacking a path to the nomination in Cleveland in July 2016. The only hope to stop Trump was a brokered convention or an alternative to Trump, but neither materialized. On the Democratic side, the story was different. The field there was not big, only 6 to start, but 3 dropped out before any primary or caucus, and 1 during the primaries, leaving only 2 people, Hillary Clinton and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. The chair of the DNC was this ugly woman, Florida Congressional Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She has suffered criticism from the Sanders campaign when she decided there will only be 6 debates between the candidates. Further, the times chosen for the debates were unpopular and less likely to be watched. The first debate only garnered about 15.8 million viewers, and it was downhill from there. She also, at one point, cut off the ability of the Sanders campaign to access their registered voter database. Normally, this would kill a campaign had the decision stayed in place. She blamed it on an unspecified data breach. The finance chief of the DNC was caught scheduling a campaign fundraising event for Clinton, which is against their bylaws. When caught, Schultz refused to fire the finance chief. In her public comments, she dismissed the Sanders candidacy, claiming it was nothing but bluster. In the summer of 2015, Dutch intelligence notified U.S. authorities of an intrusion into the computer system of the DNC by a cyber outfit known as Cozy Bear. Cozy Bear is believed to be associated with the Russian government security apparatus, particularly the SVR. Another alleged Russian intelligence service linked hacking group, Fancy Bear, hacked into the system of the DNC in April 2016, we're told. Fancy Bear is associated with Russian military intelligence, the GRU. In September 2015, a special agent with the FBI, I think his last name was Hawkins, had contacted Yared Tamim about the attempted hack. Tamim is not a full-time employee of the DNC, but works for a company called the MIS department in Chicago, which was contracted by the DNC to run their computer systems. Tamim was left out in the cold to not only determine the accuracy of the call from this Hawkins guy, but even whether it was a legitimate FBI agent. Further email contact was out of the question lest the FBI inadvertently tip off Cozy Bear that they were on to them. Hawkins never showed up in person and had advised Tamim to look for a particular malware called Dukes. Tamim scanned the system and found nothing. Hawkins continued to leave voice messages in the fall of 2015, which went unanswered. As Tamim later explained, he found nothing wrong and nothing to report. In November 2015, Hawkins allegedly notified the DNC that the DNC server was calling home to Moscow. The following month, December 2015, Victoria Nuland at the State Department was briefed about the hacking operation and concluded that it had all the earmarks of a state-sponsored operation, most likely from Russia. According to the official narrative, in April, Fancy Bear installed X-Agent malware on the DNC server and the DCCC. By April 18th, the GRU had apparently successfully hacked into the DNC servers and 4 days later began exfiltrating gigabytes of data from those servers. On April 30th, 2016, the DNC became aware their system had been hacked and that information was stolen, and they hired CrowdStrike, a cybersecurity firm. And this is where the story gets a little weird. The CEO of CrowdStrike is Sean Henry. In 2008, Henry had been elevated to the head of the FBI's cyber division, then the head of the DC field office, where he remained until 2012, when he left the FBI to take up his job with CrowdStrike. Upon hearing of the breach, Michael Sussman, a lawyer for the DNC, hired CrowdStrike and contacted Sean Henry. The discovery created such an alarm that CrowdStrike founder Dmitry Alperovich was contacted. He installed Falcon software on the DNC servers, and within minutes, he said it lit up. On May 13th, event logs were erased from these servers, making it difficult to trace whoever hacked into the system. 2 days later, based on the findings of CrowdStrike, the DNC notified the FBI of the intrusion, which opened up an investigation, asked to examine the servers directly, but were denied by the DNC. Despite the efforts of CrowdStrike, the intruders remained on the server until October 2016. In June 2016, CrowdStrike confiscated the laptops of all DNC workers and replaced the infected software. Then on June 14th, the Washington Post reported that the DNC computers had been breached. Now, with the stories in the public domain, CrowdStrike and the DNC pressured the FBI to announce that the breach was perpetrated by the Russians. In the wake of the previously alleged breach that blocked Sanders from accessing the DNC voter database and screaming from the Sanders campaign, which was echoed by the Trump campaign, that the democratic process was rigged in Clinton's favor, the DNC had a public relations nightmare on their hands as they headed to their national convention in Philadelphia on July 25th. The narrative was that the perpetrators were Russia. CrowdStrike based these conclusions on the fact that the attacks mirrored previous cyber attacks they had observed by Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear, which again are suspected to be operational arms of the GRU and the FSB. Further, they said the code for the malware was allegedly written in Russian servers, and the activity occurred between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Moscow time, suggesting that it was a state operative and not someone burning the midnight oil doing the hacking, as if they work 9 to 5 in Russia, hacking things. This makes the whole situation even murkier given the entrance of Guccifer 2.0, not to be confused with Marcel Lazar Lahel, the Romanian hacker sentenced to 7 years in jail in Romania and later 52 months in the United States for similar hacking activity. Guccifer 2.0 seems to be an online name that is a homage to the original Guccifer, who claimed he was responsible for the DNC hack. On July 14, 2016, he sent Guccifer 2.0 sent encrypted files with instructions on how to access them to WikiLeaks. 4 days later, he sent documents and files to The Hill, describing the political strategies of both major parties and a list of banks that received bailouts and later contributed to politicians in both parties. This shows that Guccifer 2.0 had gained access not only to the DNC files, but also those of the Republicans. He then set up a WordPress blog and released about 200 pages of documents, including DNC opposition research on their November rival, Donald Trump. Most of the information in that file was open source information and what was already available in the public domain or whispered in quiet circles. There was certainly nothing earth-shattering or jaw-dropping, just a rehash of Trump's remarks and actions and political positions, all dripping with political correctness. Then 3 days before the convention in Philadelphia, WikiLeaks released the batches of documents pilfered. Guccifer 2.0 claimed that the documents included 100 gigabytes of financial reports, donor information, and political strategies to be used against the Republicans. So this was a political hack, and those who engage in such activity usually do so to extract embarrassing information, which they usually publish immediately. State actors lurk in a computer system over time, trying to glean strategic information for use later. Could it be that Guccifer 2.0 is a creation of the Russian intelligence? Here, former Trump campaign manager Roger Stone comes into play, and the indictment against him may provide some answers. In August 2016, Stone said that he had been in contact with Guccifer 2.0 via Twitter Messenger. He published a brief article on Breitbart saying Russia was not behind the DNC hack. Again, one has to go through the timeline and some forensics here. In June 2016, Guccifer 2.0 started sharing the documents through his WordPress blog, while also reaching out to WikiLeaks, a known lobbyist, journalist, and a congressional candidate. His leaks started almost immediately after the Washington Post published a story of the DNC hack. The experts say Guccifer 2.0 must be an online persona created by Russian intelligence. In this view, they are trying to cover their tracks after an operation went bad. But there's no conclusive evidence that Guccifer 2.0 is associated with the GRU or FSB in Russia. What may have been in play here is the possibility that they covered themselves and the files in the digital equivalent of a made in Russia label while claiming to be Romanian. A lone hacker can also add a layer of misdirection that journalists, cyber experts, and forensic analysts could easily pull off the veil and discover the Russian fingerprints. In effect, Guccifer 2.0 translates into a false hacking claim, but why and by whom? For a clue, we have to go back to 2011, when financial services providers engaged in economic sanctions against WikiLeaks by instituting denial of services, blocking donations, and freezing funds. A group of online activists took revenge on them, starting with PayPal, and the group was dubbed LulzSec. Now, they expose shadowy tech firms and acquire Stratford emails while also playing mischief with firms that contemplated taking action against WikiLeaks. Their mischief was short-lived when the group's leader, known as Sabu online, was exposed as Hector Xavier Monsegur, and he was arrested in New York in 2011. Monsegur was compromised by the FBI and his activities persisted. Some hackers were arrested, while others were recruited by Sabu to target foreign entities and governments unknowingly while he was under the supervision of the FBI. Sabu was being used by the FBI to bait WikiLeaks with false information. This leads to the theory that Guccifer 2.0 is actually the person behind the investigation of the DNC server, none other than Sean Henry. A rather stunning coincidence occurs between the LulzSec case and the DNC case. The arresting agent was the guy on the left there, Chris Tarbell, and the supervising agent was none other than Sean Henry. It would appear that Sean Henry has this incredible history of overseeing investigations of questionable hacks. Now, it is possible that CrowdStrike is covering something up by attributing the DNC hack to Russia in the absence of concrete proof. Instead, the Guccifer 2.0 persona is created, leaving a plethora of Russian fingerprints that lead later investigators straight into the GRU and FSB. Stone contends that the DNC server was never hacked, and there's no way to prove otherwise since the FBI relies solely on the CrowdStrike report, which is true. If it was not hacked, how did Guccifer 2.0 or WikiLeaks get the information? The only other way is through an inside job. If the Russians actually conducted an internet-based hack of the DNC computer network, surely the NSA would have evidence of such an attack through their metadata collection and storage efforts. The NSA could have stated they had irrefutable proof that Russia was behind the hacking. I mean, Edward Snowden proved the NSA had the ability to do so. So despite what the DOJ declares, an examination of the DNC files published on WikiLeaks does not support the conclusion that the emails were stolen by spear phishing. Instead, they're likely copied onto electronic media like a CD-ROM or this thing, a thumb drive. Now, they were created on the 23rd, 25th, and 26th of May, 2016. Since they appear in a FAT system format, they must have been transferred using a device like a thumb drive. The proof is in the timestamps of the WikiLeaks files. Every single one of the files ends in an even number. Only in a FAT file system does the timestamp round up to the nearest even second. There's even more interesting evidence that this was not an internet-based hack carried out from Moscow. Math and physics prove it. A forensic analysis of the Guccifer 2.0 posted emails proves they could not have been downloaded over the internet. That analysis of the embedded metadata in the emails was compared against internet speeds in the United States at the time. The highest data transfer rate was 49.1 megabytes per second. The analysts then looked at transfer speeds from a source in the United States to Great Britain. That was only 12 megabytes per second. So go further to Russia, it would be even less. The reason proffered by CrowdStrike also calls into question the origin of the hack. According to CrowdStrike, the company found the Russians messing around in the system on May 6th. So what did CrowdStrike do about it? Nothing. They later claimed they deliberately did nothing to avoid alerting the Russians that they had been discovered. This is a ridiculous argument. So you have a cybersecurity firm, one of the biggest in the country, waiting 45 days to take action against a major alleged Russian hack on the DNC's computer system. Their actions make intuitive sense under only one condition. They discovered the files had been stolen from the DNC computers by use of a thumb drive, but the culprit hadn't been detected. Allowing an FBI forensic examination of the server would have given the NSA the opportunity to trace the source of the hack, if it had been a hack and not an inside job. In congressional testimony in 2017, Sean Henry testified under oath, quote, "There's no evidence they were actually exfiltrated. There's circumstantial evidence, but no evidence they were actually exfiltrated." Now, that's a rather definitive statement. Of the 44,000 emails eventually published through Guccifer 2.0 or WikiLeaks, 98% of them were among senior DNC officials between April 18th and May 25th of 2016. During more than half that time, CrowdStrike had already installed its software on the DNC's servers and was monitoring the network. The company has never explained how the documents were pilfered under its watch and why it failed to discover evidence. Despite monitoring the system with full awareness, the hackers were present. Henry's congressional testimony also seems to contradict the testimony of James Comey. The DNC's Director of Technology, Andrew Brown, shown here, testified the DNC complied with FBI requests, while Yared Tamim testified the FBI never asked for access to the servers, and the DNC's outside counsel, Michael Sussman, testified the FBI never asked for full access to the servers. According to Tamim, the DNC handed over images of its servers to CrowdStrike, which then handed them over to the FBI. Further testimony stated that the exfiltrated files were delivered to an outside server in Illinois, which was never discovered. Regardless of what CrowdStrike stated, there was another download of DNC information on July 5th, well after when the company claimed they had taken care of the problem. Again, Guccifer 2.0 claimed responsibility. Again, the exfiltration of information from the system was attributed to Russian hackers without concrete evidence. Again, the timestamps in the metadata prove the exfiltration of information occurred in the eastern United States time zone, so theoretically it could have been done anywhere from Bangor to Miami. Originally, the DNC claimed that no information was taken regarding the many supporters and donors of the DNC. However, one set of documents turned over to some journalists revealed the names, cell phone numbers, and email addresses of many high-profile donors to the DNC. Another spreadsheet released included the names of 124 donors and activists who confirmed their attendance at the July convention. The timing of the release of the DNC emails on the eve of the party's convention in July 2016 cannot be overlooked. They eventually led to the resignation of Wasserman Schultz and seemed to confirm what Sanders had claimed since December 2015 and what Trump was saying on the campaign trail about the Democratic Party's rigged nomination process. 7 key DNC officials were outed in the emails, chief among them Louis Miranda, the communications director, Jordan Kaplan, the finance director, and Scott Comer, the finance chief of staff. But some of the most damaging information referred to Wasserman Schultz, who dismissed Sanders after an appearance he made on CNN. Others detailed apparent disarray in the Sanders campaign. And looked at objectively, nothing released through the Guccifer 2.0 blog or WikiLeaks was particularly groundbreaking. Much of the data released was available to both parties. No confidential strategies were divulged, just calculated targets and goals. What was most damaging was a series of emails between DNC leaders that show the party leadership, which is supposed to be neutral, took sides and worked to slant things in Clinton's favor. The emails prove that what Bernie Sanders was saying through his staff and what Trump was echoing on the campaign trail was true. The party was in the bag for Clinton. This was later confirmed by Donna Brazile, who replaced Wasserman Schultz as party chief. It was later in the year that Guccifer 2.0 again took credit for the hacking and release of confidential emails of Clinton campaign operative John Podesta. Unlike the DNC episode, there was ample evidence that Podesta's Gmail account was hacked by unknown entities through a spear phishing campaign. The Podesta email leak dominated the news cycles toward the end of the presidential campaign in 2016. Unlike the DNC and DCCC leaks, these were more troubling and painted a picture specifically of candidate Hillary Clinton and her husband. They weren't complimentary. When looked at in the aggregate, we can easily determine that everything published by WikiLeaks, or Guccifer 2.0, was 100% accurate. The most interesting part of the leaked Clinton, Podesta, and DNC leaks is that they were never denied by anyone mentioned. Instead of denial or explanation, they engaged in a systematic and coordinated effort of deflection of attribution onto the Russians. One would have to question what Putin and the Russians had to gain from engaging in this. To Putin, the Democrats and Hillary Clinton, who he hates, were running around like clowns. Importantly, we learned from the Podesta emails that stories about Hillary Clinton in the works by such outlets as CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and Washington Post were often cleared first by the Clinton campaign before they were ever published. We got to look at also the story of Seth Rich, since he is often referred to as the DNC insider who possibly took information off that DNC computers. Rich had left his native Nebraska after graduating from college with a political science degree and moved to Washington. There he got a job at the Democratic pollster and strategist firm called Greenberg Quinlan Rosner. He worked there for 3 years before landing a job with the DNC, helping to develop a computer application that would help voters find their polling stations. On the night of July 10th, 2016, Rich went to a sports bar about 2 miles from his apartment, where he often went, and left when the bar closed at around 1:45. Responding to reports of gunfire, D.C. police responded to the location and found the body of Rich, the victim of 2 gunshot wounds to the back. He was rushed to the hospital, where he died an hour and a half later. Police suspected robbery was the motive, since this area where he was shot had a spate of recent robberies. A later investigation revealed that he was on the phone with his girlfriend at the time, and she reported hearing a commotion, but Rich told her not to worry before he hung up. The investigation also revealed that there was a struggle, as he had defensive bruises on his hands, face, and knees. However, he was shot in the back twice. Nothing was stolen, as he still has his cell phone, his wallet, money, and credit cards when the police discovered his body. Rich's connection to the story takes on added significance when Julian Assange at WikiLeaks offered a reward for information leading to the arrest of Rich's killers. Assange was cagey when asked if Rich was the source of the documents, insisting that they never expose their sources and that the reward should not be inferred to suggest such. But people who work for Rich noted that he was anything but an experienced computer hacker. By the time Rich was murdered, CrowdStrike and the DNC had already determined that the breach was a Russian hack, not an inside job. Rich he wasn't an experienced hacker, but he knew how to use a thumb drive. The last extraction of material from the DNC computer system occurred in the early evening hours of July 5th, 2016 by someone working in the Eastern Time Zone. Exactly 1,976 megabytes of information were downloaded in 87 seconds. It had to be an external storage device, since it is far beyond the capacity of internet downloads in 2016, and clearly beyond the capacity to download information across the Atlantic. A few days later, Rich is found murdered. And there was another interesting story. in December 2016 out of Moscow. Starting then, 4 Russians were arrested. Sergei Mikhailov, a high-ranking cyber spy, Ruslan Stoyanov, a private industry cyber expert, Sergei Fomchenkov, a former government cyber spy, and Dmitry Dukachev, an associate of Mikhailov. 2 months later, they were charged with treason. Specifically, they were charged with cooperating with U.S. intelligence, investigating claims that Russia was responsible for these hacks. So if it's not Russia, then who? Every reliable forensic analysis of the metadata, despite the reasons suggested by the IC contingent, points to the fact that the DNC and Podesta hacks were in fact not a hack but an inside job by someone who downloaded the information directly from the network of the DNC and provided it to WikiLeaks. Whether that person was Seth Rich will probably never be known, as that avenue of investigation ended in a pool of blood on a Washington, D.C. street corner at 4:19 a.m. one morning. But for the sake of argument, let us assume that Russia and Putin in particular were behind this. What did they hope to gain? One has to ask themselves, if you were Vladimir Putin in 2016, who would you prefer to be the next president? Would you want a known entity in Hillary Clinton or an unknown entity like Donald Trump who said nice things about you on the campaign trail? One overlooked fact, and one barely mentioned by Robert Mueller or the many investigations concerns the Republican Party. Namely, they were also a victim of the Russians, assuming Russia was behind the DNC hacking effort. Some unnamed government sources told Real Clear Investigations that the RNC emails were in fact stolen by using the same spear phishing techniques used against John Podesta. In the Mueller indictment against the GRU officials on page 13 of a 29-page indictment, there's a passing reference to this which says it was Republican individuals, not the RNC. Lending credence to the belief that the efforts went beyond just the DNC or the Democrats, one report states that over 4,000 Americans were targeted, including Colin Powell, whose emails were published and showed disparaging comments about both Trump and Clinton. One of the key elements of the Steele dossier, the early January 2017 intelligence assessment, and the Mueller investigation was that these hacking efforts were conducted with the goal of helping Trump win the election. Then why release Powell emails disparaging Trump? Mueller also says that the websites DC Leaks and the online persona Guccifer 2.0 were Russian intelligence fronts. Using the same language that the email dumps were timed for maximum negative exposure, the DNC email dump occurred as the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia was getting underway. That's a fact. Overlooked is another fact. The release through Guccifer 2.0 of 237 pages of damaging information on Trump just before the start of the Republican Convention in Cleveland. In other words, this was just somebody playing games with both parties. The DNC one just got the biggest publicity. And that's it. Have a great day. More pleasant tomorrow.